"There's something alive in your head." That's what the hairdresser screamed, before dropping her comb and backing away in horror. Emily thought she had a few stress pimples, but what they found living beneath her scalp would leave an entire salon screaming, and a 17-year-old girl scarred for life. Before you scroll, ask yourself this: have you ever ignored a weird bump on your skin, thinking it was nothing? You might want to hear this story first. Hit subscribe for more true, unbelievable stories that could save your health or your life. And tell us in the comments, have you ever had a strange symptom that turned out to be something serious? Your experience might help someone else catch the warning signs in time. Emily Harper sat quietly in the leather salon chair, her heart fluttering with the kind of nervous excitement only a 17-year-old girl could feel on prom day. The overhead lights gleamed softly against the mirrors, and the faint scent of eucalyptus and lavender floated through the air. Everything was calm, clean, perfect. She closed her eyes as warm water poured over her scalp. It was comforting, soothing. Tracy, her favorite hair technician at La Belle Vie, massaged shampoo into her long brown hair, her fingers working in slow, practiced circles. Emily allowed herself to imagine what tonight would be like, walking into the gym-turned-ballroom under twinkle lights, her dress swaying just right, Jake waiting in his suit and tie with that half-smile he gave only her. Everything had to be flawless. Then Tracy stopped. The motion in her fingers halted, freezing mid-massage. For a moment, Emily thought it was just a pause. Maybe she was grabbing more shampoo. But when she cracked one eye open, she saw Tracy frowning, her hands still buried in Emily's wet hair. "You okay?" Emily asked lightly. Tracy blinked. "Yeah, she hesitated. "I felt something strange." "Strange how?" Emily chuckled nervously. "It's probably just my stress sits. My scalp's been breaking out like crazy lately." Tracy didn't laugh. Instead, she tilted Emily's head slightly to the side and began parting the wet hair with her fingers. "Sorry," she said softly. "Just want to check something real quick." Emily sat still, the air suddenly feeling colder against her wet skin. She heard Tracy inhale sharply, barely audible but unmistakable. Then came a whisper, barely a breath. "What the hell? What?" Emily asked again, this time a little louder. Tracy didn't answer. She picked up a long rat tail comb and carefully raked through the hair at the crown of Emily's head. She leaned in close, her breath catching. There it was again, that bump. Emily had felt it before. Annoying but harmless, or so she thought. But now, Tracy's face had gone pale. In the center of the raised bump was a tiny pinhole, nothing like a regular pimple. And as Tracy stared at it, something moved, something white, segmented, alive. It retracted quickly, as if sensing it had been discovered. Tracy stumbled back. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Tracy?" Emily's voice was sharp now, frightened. "What is it?" Tracy didn't respond immediately. She stared at her hands like they were contaminated. Then she looked straight at Emily and said it. "There's something alive in your scalp." Tracy's voice rang through the salon like a fire alarm. "There's something alive in her scalp." The room froze. For half a second, no one moved. Then a ripple of panic spread like shock waves through the brightly lit space. A woman mid-blowout dropped her latte. The cup shattered on the tile. Another customer jumped out of her chair, still draped in a plastic cape, and backed toward the exit. A girl with foil in her hair gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Alive?" someone whispered. "Is it lice? Is it contagious?" Emily sat up, blinking through the shampoo bubbles clinging to her hairline. Her chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" she said, voice trembling. "What's alive?" Tracy was pale. She looked like she might throw up. "There's a bump. I thought it was just acne or something, but it has a hole in it. And I swear, when I touched it, something inside it moved." Moved, the word echoed in Emily's head like thunder. No one else seemed to hear anything else after that either. All they knew was someone said alive. And now the room was reacting like the floor was on fire. People grabbed their purses, yanked off capes, and started filing toward the door. A teenager pulled out her phone and hit record. Another woman snatched her child's hand and practically dragged her outside. And through it all, Emily sat frozen in the chair, her scalp dripping, her heart jackhammering in her chest. Tracy stepped away completely, rubbing her hands with a towel like she'd touched something rotten. From the back office, the salon owner emerged, Michelle Ramsey, a confident woman in her early 40s with straightened, blonde hair and the kind of voice that could settle a riot. But as soon as she saw the look on Tracy's face, her posture stiffened. What's going on? Michelle asked sharply. Tracy didn't look up. You need to see this. Michelle approached, setting down her tablet and reaching for the comb Tracy had dropped. She leaned down and began gently parting Emily's hair. She said nothing for a long moment, then, softly under her breath, "Oh no." "What?" Emily whispered, her throat dry. Michelle didn't answer. She parted another section, and then another. Each one revealed the same thing, red swollen bumps about the size of marbles. And in the center of each bump, a tiny hole. One or two even glistened with a clear, syrupy fluid. Michelle leaned in close to one of them. Then she jerked back. "God," she said, barely audible. "They're all moving." A woman near the back screamed. "I'm not staying here," someone shouted. "Out," Michelle said firmly, standing upright. "Everyone who's not staff, please exit the salon immediately. We have a medical emergency." A woman, with a round brush, still tangled in her hair, protested, "Are you kidding me? I have a wedding in 3 hours." "Out." "Now," Michelle snapped, pointing toward the door. Within 5 minutes, the salon was empty. Chairs still turned, foils half done, a flat iron still buzzing on a counter. Only 4 people remained. Michelle, Tracy, another assistant standing silently by the wall, and Emily Harper, sitting motionless, her scalp soaked, her mind spiraling. She could feel them now, not just the pain or pressure, the movement, something squirming beneath the skin, not a sensation, not imagination, real. She wanted to rip them out, to dig her fingernails into her scalp and claw until they were gone. But she didn't move. She couldn't. Michelle bent down beside her. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "we need to call your mom." Emily nodded slowly, tears beginning to mix with the water on her cheeks. 15 minutes later, the glass door flew open. Diane Harper, her mother, stormed inside, still in scrubs from the dental office where she worked. "What happened?" she cried, rushing forward. "Emily, baby, what's going on?" Tracy stepped back. Michelle took over, guiding Diane to the chair. "There's something in her scalp," Michelle said carefully. "We don't know what exactly, but it's alive. There are multiple bumps. 7 that I counted." Diane's face drained of color. 7. Emily didn't say a word. She just stared down at her knees, letting the water drip. "We're going to the hospital," Diane said firmly, wrapping an arm around her daughter. Michelle nodded. "You need to. Immediately." As they walked toward the door, Emily looked back once more at the mirror, and in that fleeting second, she saw herself. Not the perfect girl in the prom dress she'd imagined, but a pale, wet figure with red-rimmed eyes and a haunted look. Something was inside her. 7 things. And one of them had just twitched again. 6 weeks earlier, Emily Harper stepped off the rickety shuttle bus and into a wall of heat so thick it made her glasses fog. The air in Costa Rica felt like someone had turned up the humidity to maximum and never turned it back down. Sweat began forming on the back of her neck before she'd even finished pulling her suitcase out from under the bus. "Welcome to the jungle," someone called out behind her, probably Mason, one of the guys from her group who thought he was funny. Emily smiled politely, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The moment felt surreal. In less than a week, she'd gone from chilly spring mornings in Ohio to the lush, tangled rainforest of Central America. It was loud. Birds, monkeys, insects, and everything looked like it had been dipped in green. She glanced around at the others. About 20 of them in total, all part of the senior class volunteer program. The trip was supposed to be educational, environmental trail work, cultural exchange, maybe a bit of Spanish practice. But everyone knew why they were really here, for the photos, the kind that made your college application stand out. Ivy League admissions committees loved phrases like global awareness and hands-on service experience. Their guide, a cheerful man named Andres, waved them forward toward a narrow dirt path leading into the trees. "This way, chicos, just a short hike to the Eco Lodge." Short hike turned out to be 40 minutes uphill. Emily's shoes were soaked with sweat before they even reached their cabins. The lodge was beautiful in its own rustic way. Open-air walls, hammocks, mosquito nets, and wooden balconies overlooking a river. No AC, no Wi-Fi, and no privacy. Still, it felt like an adventure. Something real. Something outside of her carefully scheduled, tightly wound suburban life. That night, as she lay on a bamboo cot with the hum of frogs and crickets outside, she smiled. Maybe this trip was exactly what she needed. By day 3, the romance of the jungle began to wear thin. The heat was constant and aggressive, Every item of clothing stuck to her body like a second skin. Bugs were everywhere. She'd already counted 8 different types of bites on her arms alone. During their trail work, they hacked at vines and cleared brush in the thick undergrowth. Emily wore her hair tied high in a ponytail to keep it off her sweaty neck. She constantly felt flies landing on her scalp, but she waved them away without much thought. That was just part of the jungle experience, right? One afternoon, after a long shift digging drainage ditches, she sat on a fallen log, exhausted. One of the local women working with them smiled and approached, holding out a small garland of flowers. "For you," the woman said in accented English. "Oh, thank you." Emily beamed, genuinely touched. The woman nodded and placed the garland carefully around her head. It smelled sweet and earthy, a mix of marigold and something she couldn't name. Emily wore it proudly the rest of the day. Photos were taken, Emily with her flower crown standing beside a wheelbarrow full of mud, grinning like a National Geographic cover girl. She posted it later when they got into town for dinner and found Wi-Fi. What Emily didn't see, what no one saw, were the tiny black flies that had landed on her scalp while she laughed and posed. They were there for only seconds. Long enough. That night, Emily fell asleep with her flower crown still in her hair. The lodge was quiet, except for the jungle's endless soundtrack, chirping insects, distant howler monkeys, the occasional rustle of something moving just beyond the mosquito screens. She lay in her hammock, swaying gently in the humid breeze, lulled by the rhythmic buzzing around her. At some point she woke to scratching, not from herself, but from the sound of others. The guy in the next hammock over, she couldn't remember his name, was shifting constantly, slapping at his arms. A girl across the room cursed softly and muttered, "I swear these bugs are chewing through the netting." Emily felt the same. Even with the mosquito net drawn tight around her hammock, she could hear the buzz right near her ears. Something tickled her scalp. She brushed at it groggily, half asleep, and drifted off again. By morning, she had forgotten all about it. The next few days blurred together in a haze of heat and routine. Wake up, cold rinse from a rain barrel shower, mosquito spray, hike, work, sweat, repeat. By day 5, Emily started to feel it, a persistent itch at the top of her scalp. Just a spot, barely noticeable, like a mild sunburn or maybe dandruff. She ran her fingers through her hair during breakfast and scratched absent-mindedly. "You okay?" her cabin mate Zoe asked. Emily shrugged. "Just itchy. My scalp's freaking out in this weather." "Tell me about it," Zoe said, pulling her frizzy curls into a messy bun. "I think my conditioner gave up on day 2. Emily laughed and didn't think much more of it. The itching got worse by the end of the day. A kind of crawling sensation, not constant, but enough to make her scratch harder than she should have. She figured it was sweat buildup, maybe shampoo residue, maybe even a reaction to the bug spray. That night, she stood at the small cracked mirror above the communal sink and examined her hairline. She didn't see anything, no rash, no redness, just a scalp in need of a serious deep clean. Later, as she lay in her hammock, she found herself rubbing the itchy spot again. Her fingers grazed something, a bump, small, like a pimple under the skin. She sighed. Of course, she muttered to herself. Jungle acne. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that what had started as a pinprick had already become a nursery. On day 6, the group took a hike deeper into the rainforest to visit a reforestation site. The air was heavier than usual, rain threatening in the clouds. Emily wore a bandana tied loosely over her hair to keep the sweat out of her eyes. She felt 2 more itchy spots along her scalp during the hike. Her head felt warmer than normal, and she started to wonder if maybe she was having a heat rash. Still, she said nothing. Complaining about discomfort seemed petty when everyone else looked just as miserable. That evening, they gathered in the main lodge for a final group dinner. Andres brought out a cake shaped like a jaguar's face, and everyone took turns sharing their favorite moment of the week. Emily talked about helping rebuild the hillside trail and how proud she was to carry stones the locals had once said were too heavy for tourists. They took more photos, laughed, hugged, drank fruit juice from hollowed coconuts. Later, as Emily packed her backpack for the journey home, she tossed her now wilted flower crown into the trash. She didn't notice the small smudge of dark residue on the inside, something blackish and sticky, like dried sap or smashed insects. The next morning, on the flight back to Ohio, she reclined her seat and finally, truly relaxed. Her skin itched, Her hair felt heavy. Her scalp throbbed faintly beneath the airplane's filtered air, but she was going home, and whatever had come back with her was going with her too. Emily Harper stepped off the plane and into the cool, dry air of Ohio like it was the first breath she'd had in a week. Everything felt lighter, less sticky, less chaotic, less alive. Costa Rica had been beautiful, yes, but it had also been hot, bug-ridden, and exhausting. Her mom was waiting just outside the security checkpoint holding a cardboard coffee tray with 2 lattes and waving wildly the moment she spotted Emily. Her hair was in its usual bun, and her scrubs were wrinkled from a long day at the dental clinic. "Oh, honey, you look tired," Diane said as she pulled Emily into a hug. Emily chuckled. "That's generous. I probably smell like the jungle." "You kind of do," Diane admitted, handing her a latte. On the drive home, Emily talked about monkeys, hiking trails, the little girl who taught her how to say frog in Spanish, and the birthday cake shaped like a jaguar. She left out the part about the itching, about how her scalp had started to feel like it was pulsing under her ponytail. That was just travel stress, she figured. The kind of discomfort that would vanish with a hot shower and clean sheets. That night, after a long shower and some much-needed air conditioning, Emily stood in front of her bathroom mirror, wrapped in a towel, and ran her fingers through her freshly washed hair. Her scalp still felt wrong, not painful, not even itchy exactly, just tender. She winced when her fingers brushed over a particular spot on the crown of her head. She tilted her head toward the mirror and tried to get a better look, but her hair was too thick, and the lighting was terrible. "Mom," she called down the hall, "can you check something for me?" Diane appeared a moment later, already in pajamas. "What's up? Just feel right here." Emily guided her mother's hand to the spot. "Tell me if you feel a bump." Diane gently ran her fingers through Emily's hair, then paused. "Yeah, feels like a little zit under the skin. Maybe a cyst." "Great," Emily muttered. "It's probably from stress, or the heat. Your skin's probably freaking out from the humidity down there. Just don't pick at it. Should I put something on it?" "Try tea tree oil," Diane said. "That usually helps dry things out." Emily followed the advice. That night she dabbed a few drops of tea tree oil on the sore spot and went to bed convinced it would be gone in a day or two. It wasn't. By the end of the week there were 3 bumps. They didn't look like much, barely noticeable through her thick brown hair, but she could feel them. Tiny raised lumps that didn't seem to be going away. They didn't have heads like regular pimples. They didn't itch the way bug bites did. They just sat there, quiet, persistent. She didn't tell her mom about the new ones. What was the point? They weren't hurting that much. Besides, she had more important things to focus on, catching up on schoolwork, finalizing prom details, figuring out how to submit her college essay revisions before the deadline. The bumps became background noise. She'd changed shampoos. She cleaned her brush. She even stopped wearing hats for a few days, just in case. Maybe her scalp was clogged. Maybe it was just reacting to travel. That made sense. What didn't make sense was how they felt when she pressed on them. Not squishy, not fluid-filled, solid, like tiny marbles tucked under her skin. But again, she said nothing. It was easier to ignore things than to slow down. Easier to assume the body would heal itself. That these kinds of things always went away. Except sometimes they didn't. By the second week back home, the bumps had grown. They were no longer small or subtle. Each one had puffed up like a marble under Emily's scalp. Tight, sore, and too firm to be pimples. She could feel them even when she wasn't touching them. They throbbed at night, especially when her head hit the pillow at a certain angle. She told herself it was just inflammation, maybe infected hair follicles. She Googled things like stress-related scalp cysts and pimples that hurt but don't pop. She didn't like the search results, so she closed the tab. Then one afternoon, Jake ran his fingers through her hair and paused. They were lying on the couch in his basement, watching a documentary he had picked out because he said it would help with her global awareness. Emily had her head in his lap. His hand moved gently along her part, grazing her scalp. Then it stopped. "What's this?" he asked, sitting up a little. Emily's heart skipped. She knew immediately what he had found. His fingers were resting on the bump just above her left temple, the one that had appeared 2 days ago and was already tender to the touch. "It's nothing," she said quickly, sitting upright. "Just some scalp acne. I've had it before." Jake tilted his head, confused. "This big?" She shrugged. "I guess. Maybe it's a cyst or something. It's gross, I know." "It's not gross," he said, too quickly, too politely. but Emily caught the way he glanced at his fingers, like he expected to see something on them. She turned away, brushing her hair down to cover the spot. Jake didn't say anything else, but his hand didn't go back into her hair. Not for the rest of the night. That was when she started wearing her hair down all the time. Loose waves, parted just right, bangs forward. She became strategic about when she let people get close. She avoided hugs that were too tight, kisses where Jake might touch her hair, moments where her mom might absent-mindedly brush it away from her forehead. By week 3, there were 5 bumps, and they were no longer just painful. They were weird. Not warm like an infection, not red like irritated skin. They had no heads, no pus, no surface to drain, just tight skin stretched over something that felt wrong. One morning, after a sleepless night of tossing and turning, she looked in the mirror and dared to part her hair with her fingers. That's when she saw it. A tiny hole. It was barely visible, no bigger than the head of a pin, but it was centered perfectly on one of the bumps, right at the top. And worse, there was something oozing from it, not pus, something thinner, almost clear with a yellowish tinge. She dabbed it with tissue. It kept coming. Emily's stomach turned. It was draining, like something inside was trying to breathe. Still, she didn't tell anyone. Not her mom, not Jake, not even Zoe, who she texted with every day. The last thing she wanted was for someone to Google hole in scalp and get the same terrifying results she had. Parasitic larvae, botfly infection, surgical removal. Nope. It was easier to believe it was stress, hormones, a rare side effect of Costa Rican shampoo. She even started using antifungal medicated scalp treatments, convinced that if she could just dry them out, they'd go away. But deep down, a new kind of fear was forming, a quiet whisper that grew louder with each passing day. Zits don't grow this fast, zits don't breathe. It started on a Thursday night. Emily had just washed her hair for the second time that day, trying to keep the crusty discharge from matting. The medicated shampoo stung now. The bumps were too raw, too swollen. Her scalp felt like it was on fire. She sat on her bed, towel around her shoulders, and tried not to cry. It was prom week. She was supposed to be glowing. Instead, she was scrubbing dried fluid from her hairbrush and Googling phrases like draining cyst on scalp with hole in middle. She leaned forward, letting her hair fall in front of her face, and used the hand mirror to examine the bump nearest her temple. And then it moved. Not her hair. Not her skin shifting. Not a muscle twitch. The bump moved. A definite squirm. A twitch beneath the skin. Rhythmic. Unmistakable. It felt like something flexing inside her head, like a muscle that didn't belong to her. Emily dropped the mirror. Her breath caught in her chest. She stood up fast, heart hammering, and stared into the full-length mirror across the room. This isn't happening, she told herself. You're tired. You're under pressure. College, prom, Jake, everything. Your brain is just imagining things. Phantom feelings, stress hallucinations. She sat back down, hands shaking. Then it moved again. She gasped, clutching the edge of her desk. Her scalp twitched. No, not her scalp. Something inside it. She could feel it moving, like a small worm coiling and uncoiling inside a tight pouch of skin. She pressed her fingers to the spot gently. The movement stopped. She held her breath, and slowly, she felt it again. Like a slow, sick roll beneath the surface. A squirm, a stretch, a shift. Emily jumped to her feet and ran to the bathroom. "Mom!" she yelled instinctively, but halfway through the hallway, she stopped. What would she say? What if she was wrong? She stared at herself in the mirror again. Her eyes were wild, rimmed in pink. Her hair, wet and tangled, clung to her cheeks. Her scalp ached under the weight of her own silence. What if it really was a parasite? What would people say? Jake would never touch her again. Her friends would freak. She could already hear the whispers. That's the girl who had maggots in her head. No, it couldn't be that. Not in America. Not to her. She took a deep breath. Prom was in 2 days. She'd made the appointment with Tracy weeks ago. They were doing a vintage twist with braids and pearl pins. She'd already bought her dress. Jake had rented a tux. Everything was in place. Whatever this was, it could wait until after prom. Just one more day, one more photo, one more night of pretending nothing was wrong. She turned off the bathroom light, climbed back into bed, and pulled the covers over her head, ignoring the soft, crawling sensation that hadn't stopped moving since she sat down. Prom day. Emily sat in the front seat of her mom's car, cradling a to-go coffee in her lap and pretending that everything was normal. The dress hung in the back seat, protected in plastic. Her shoes were in a box on the floor. Her hair was freshly washed and still slightly damp, tucked beneath a silk scarf. She had taken extra care that morning, washing gently, drying carefully, avoiding the 7 swollen bumps that now throbbed beneath her scalp like hidden mines. The largest one had started leaking again. She'd wiped the fluid away with a cotton pad, then dabbed tea tree oil and some concealer over the spots. She hadn't slept. Not really. But she smiled when Diane dropped her off in front of La Belle Vie Salon, pretending the ache in her head wasn't real, pretending this was still going to be the night she'd dreamed about for months. Tracy greeted her at the front desk with her usual cheerful tone. "There's my prom queen," she said, reaching for a towel. "You ready for some glamour?" Emily smiled weakly. Born ready. She followed Tracy to the wash station, slipped off her scarf, and settled into the reclining shampoo chair. Warm water began to flow through her hair, and for the first few minutes, it was perfect. Soothing, comforting, like being underwater but safe. Tracy's fingers worked through the strands with practiced rhythm. "I love how thick your hair is," she said as she applied shampoo. "You've got like Disney princess volume." Emily chuckled. "It's a lot to manage." Tracy began massaging her scalp, working from the base of the neck toward the crown. Then she stopped. Emily noticed it instantly. The way the fingers froze mid-motion, the shift in rhythm, the silence. "You okay?" Emily asked without opening her eyes. "Yeah," Tracy said softly. "Just, you've got a bump here. Kind of a big one." "Yeah, I know," Emily said quickly, trying to sound casual. "It's just some acne. Stress and all." Tracy didn't respond right away. Her fingers returned, but slower now, hesitant, searching. Then came the pressure. Gentle at first, then firmer. She pressed near one of the larger bumps at the crown of Emily's head. That's when it happened. A shift, a movement, not surface movement, not skin sliding under soap, something internal, something deliberate. Tracy jerked her hand back as if she'd been stung. "What was that?" she whispered. Emily opened her eyes, heart pounding. "What? I think it moved," Tracy said. She stared at her own hand for a moment, then shook her head like trying to clear a thought she didn't want to finish. She leaned in again, parting the wet hair more carefully this time. "Hold still for a sec," she murmured, her voice low and tight. Emily sat frozen as Tracy used a tail comb to separate a clean line through her hair. Then Tracy gasped. She didn't mean to. It just slipped out, sharp and fast. "What?" Emily asked again, her voice rising. Tracy didn't answer. She dropped the comb. Her eyes were locked on Emily's scalp, and her hands hovered above her like she was afraid to touch her again. "What is it?" Emily asked, her stomach nodding. "There's a hole," Tracy said, barely audible. She leaned closer. Inside the tiny hole, something twitched. A glint of white. A segment. A ripple of movement, like a worm recoiling from the light. Tracy screamed. Tracy's scream echoed through the entire salon. It wasn't a small, startled gasp. It was a full, guttural, terrified scream. A sound that made every other stylist freeze mid-foil, made every blow-dryer pause, made every customer look up with alarm. She stumbled backward, eyes wide, hands up like she'd touched something toxic. Her lips trembled as she backed into a tray of hair products, knocking over a bottle of leave-in conditioner with a loud clatter. "There's something alive in her head," Tracy shrieked. "There's something moving in there." Emily sat up fast, shampoo water dripping down her back, her heart pounding so loud it drowned out the noise around her. "What are you talking about?" she said, voice cracking. What do you mean something's in my—" Other stylists rushed over, their curiosity quickly turning into panic. 2 customers abandoned their chairs, one still wearing foil wraps, and backed toward the front entrance. Another grabbed her purse and bolted without saying a word. Phones came out, some to call someone, others already recording. "Everyone back, give her space," Tracy yelled, though she was still trembling, clutching her hand to her chest. That's when Sandra stormed in. The owner of La Belle Vie was tall, poised, and rarely rattled by anything. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor as she cut through the chaos. "What's going on?" she demanded. Tracy pointed with a shaking finger. "There's something under her scalp. It moved." Sandra narrowed her eyes and stepped closer to Emily, who was frozen in the chair, sopping wet and pale. "May I?" Sandra asked gently, taking the comb Tracy had dropped. Emily nodded, barely. Sandra began parting the wet hair, moving with calm precision. She examined the bump, leaned in, and stilled. A moment passed. Then she parted another section. Her voice was low when she spoke next, but it carried across the salon. "There are 7, she said. 7 bumps." She leaned closer to one. "And they all have tiny holes. And they're all moving." Someone screamed behind them. Nope, I'm out," muttered a stylist near the back. She tossed her gloves into the trash and left through the break room. Another customer pushed past the front desk and ran out the door, nearly tripping over a waiting client. Sandra straightened up. "This is a sanitation emergency," she said firmly. "Everyone who is not staff, please leave the salon immediately." But my highlights, a woman in her mid-50s started to protest. Sandra cut her off. Now, within minutes, the salon was nearly empty. Foils abandoned, wet hair left unfinished, capes flung on chairs. Everyone left in a rush, not even pretending to hide their horror. Only Emily remained, still sitting in the wash chair, her hair clinging to her face and neck, water running down her back. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as she began to cry, soft at first, then harder, until she was gasping for air. Tracy hovered near the break room, visibly shaken. Sandra crouched beside Emily. "You're okay," she said softly, "but we need to call your mom." Emily nodded, unable to speak. Sandra picked up the salon phone. "What's her number?" "Speed dial 2, Emily choked out. Sandra pressed the buttons, waited. "Hi, this is Sandra from La Belle Vie. I need you to come to the salon right away. It's an emergency. Your daughter needs medical attention." She paused. "No, she's safe. But something is inside her scalp. Please just come. We'll explain when you get here." By the time Diane's car screeched into the parking lot 15 minutes later, Emily was still in the chair, dripping, shaking, and completely silent. The car ride to the emergency room was silent, except for the occasional gasp from Emily. She sat hunched in the passenger seat, clutching a towel Sandra had wrapped around her. Her hair was still wet, tangled, and heavy against her scalp. Water and shampoo had soaked through the collar of her hoodie. She kept one hand pressed gently to the side of her head, as if trying to hold something in place, or maybe trying to convince herself it was all in her imagination. Diane gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her eyes flicked between the road and her daughter, and every time she looked, she wanted to cry. But she didn't, not yet. Not when Emily was already on the verge of breaking. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered suddenly. Diane glanced over. "Sweetheart, why are you sorry? I should have said something sooner." Diane reached across the console, placed a hand over Emily's knee. "You're okay. We're going to get this figured out." Emily didn't answer. At the ER entrance, Diane pulled into the drop-off lane, jumped out, and rushed around to the passenger side. She helped Emily to her feet, one arm wrapped protectively around her daughter's shoulders. The nurse at triage didn't even ask for a full explanation. The moment she parted Emily's hair and saw the raised bumps, the tiny holes, and, yes, the unmistakable movement beneath the skin, she went pale and picked up the red phone on the wall. "Priority 1. We've got an active parasitic infestation," she said quickly. They were rushed through the doors, bypassing the waiting room entirely. Diane barely had time to fill out the intake form before Emily was ushered into a curtained exam room, sat down on a vinyl-covered bed, and handed a hospital gown. Emily stared at it. "I don't want to take my hoodie off," she said. The nurse, her badge said Melinda, knelt beside her, voice soft. "Honey, we have to examine your scalp properly. It's going to be okay, I promise." Emily blinked fast, trying to stop the tears. Diane helped her change, untangling her hair from the hoodie gently, like she used to do when Emily was little and had gotten gum stuck in it. There were bloodstains on the back of the collar. Diane didn't say anything about it. She just folded the hoodie and set it aside. A few minutes later, the attending physician arrived. Dr. Foster, he introduced himself, early 40s, calm face, eyes sharp with focus. He wore magnifying glasses on a headlamp and had already donned gloves. "Hi, Emily. I know this is a scary situation, but we're going to figure out what's going on, all right?" Emily nodded weakly. Dr. Foster moved slowly, methodically parting her hair. 1 bump, 2, 3. He counted under his breath. By the time he found the 7th one, he paused. Then, gently, he pressed on the largest bump. The skin pulsed. Something inside shifted. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "Okay," Dr. Foster said calmly. "I have a strong suspicion what we're dealing with." Emily turned to him, eyes wide. "What is it?" He stepped back, pulled off his gloves, and spoke the words like they were part of a science lecture. Dermatobia hominis. Human botfly larvae. You have 7 of them embedded in your scalp. For a few seconds, the room went completely silent. Then Diane said, "Larvae?" Like the word itself might choke her. "Yes," Dr. Foster said. "They're parasitic, likely contracted during travel. Central or South America? Costa Rica," Emily whispered. Dr. Foster nodded. "That fits. The adult botfly lays its eggs on another insect, usually a mosquito. When the mosquito bites a human, the warmth of the skin causes the eggs to hatch. The larvae burrow under the skin, create a breathing hole, and grow over the course of several weeks." "Inside my head?" Emily croaked. "Yes, and the movement you're feeling, that's them feeding and adjusting." Emily turned away, vomited into the small trash bin beside the bed. Emily wiped her mouth and sat back slowly, trembling. The word larvae echoed in her mind, bouncing around like a pinball. Each repetition felt more unreal, more horrifying. She wanted to claw at her scalp, rip them out, all of them, right now. But Dr. Foster raised a calming hand. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "You cannot try to remove them yourself. Do not poke, do not squeeze, do not apply pressure. These larvae are anchored into your tissue using backward-pointing spines. If one tears apart during removal, the remaining segments can cause serious infection." Emily blinked rapidly. "You mean, I could get worse?" He nodded. "Much worse. Necrosis, abscesses, even sepsis if bacteria spreads. We've had cases like that before. You need an expert for proper extraction." Diane was already digging in her purse for her insurance card. "So what's next? Who do we need to see?" "I've already paged someone," Dr. Foster said. "Dr. Angela Rodriguez. She's a dermatologist who specializes in tropical parasitology. She's done dozens of these extractions, some even worse than yours." Emily turned her face into her mother's shoulder and cried silently. The image wouldn't leave her head, those things living in her, growing, breathing, squirming under her scalp while she had smiled for selfies, while she had kissed Jake, while she had slept. It was nearly 3 p.m. when Dr. Rodriguez arrived. She was in her early 50s, with silver-streaked black hair tied into a low bun and kind eyes that carried the calm of someone who had seen everything. She pulled on gloves and sat gently beside Emily, not touching her yet. "Hi, Emily. I'm Angela. Can I take a look?" Emily nodded, still sniffling. Dr. Rodriguez examined each bump in complete silence, using a high-powered magnifying headset. Her fingers were careful, methodical, confident. After several minutes, she pulled the gloves off and gave a small sigh. "This is one of the worst infestations I've seen in a teenager," she said gently. "Usually we see 1 or 2 larvae, maybe 3, but 7? Diane paled. "How did we miss this?" "Don't blame yourself," Dr. Rodriguez said. "Botfly larvae are excellent hiders. They don't cause fever. They mimic cysts or acne until they mature, and most general physicians in the U.S. never see a single case." Emily looked up at her, wiping her nose. "Can you get them out?" "Yes," Dr. Rodriguez said, "but it won't be easy. These are likely close to maturity. They've been growing for weeks, which means they're large and very well attached." "Today?" Emily asked. "Can you do it today?" Dr. Rodriguez hesitated. "I can, but I need you to understand what that involves." She leaned forward, her voice serious but kind. "I will have to shave small areas of your hair around each bump. I'll have to inject local anesthetic in 7 different sites. The extractions can be traumatic. There will be bleeding, swelling, and you'll have visible wounds, likely bandaged." Emily's lower lip trembled. "I have prom tonight." Dr. Rodriguez gave her a sympathetic smile. "Then this is your decision. We can wait until tomorrow. The larvae won't explode overnight, but the longer they stay, the more anchored they become, the bigger they grow." Emily glanced at her mom. Diane shook her head slowly. "Honey, you don't have to go tonight. I'm going," Emily said firmly, "but not with them in me. I'd rather show up covered in bandages than go knowing they're still alive in my head." Dr. Rodriguez nodded slowly. "All right then. Let's get started." Emily lay on the hospital bed, staring up at the fluorescent ceiling lights, her scalp pulsing with anticipation and fear. A tray of surgical instruments stood beside her, gleaming in the harsh light. Stainless steel forceps, scalpel, gauze. Specimen containers, lined up like little jars waiting to be filled with nightmares. Dr. Rodriguez was calm, precise. Already in her surgical gown, she moved like someone who'd done this before. but not so many times that she didn't care. That was the difference Emily noticed. The doctor's movements were expert, but her eyes still carried empathy. And that helped. A little, "Okay, Emily," Dr. Rodriguez said, pulling on a fresh pair of gloves. "I'm going to start with local anesthesia. 7 injections, 1 per site. They're going to sting, but it'll help numb the tissue before removal." Emily nodded, jaw clenched. Her hands gripped the sides of the bed, white-knuckled. "I'll be right here," Diane whispered, holding her daughter's hand. She was seated near the head of the bed, her other hand gently smoothing Emily's damp bangs. But even Diane looked pale. She hadn't spoken much since the doctor's full explanation. The idea that something had been living inside her child, that it had been growing, breathing through holes in her scalp, was too much to process all at once. Dr. Rodriguez leaned in with the first syringe. "You'll feel a pinch and a burn," she warned. Emily flinched as the needle pierced the skin near the first larva. Then the burn, deep, spreading through her scalp like fire. It made her eyes water. The second shot hurt worse. The third was numbingly sharp. By the fourth, she had tears streaming down her face. Diane wiped them away without a word. By the time all 7 sites were injected, Emily felt dizzy. Her entire scalp tingled, heavy with pressure. The numbness was settling in, but the dread remained fully alive. Then came the clippers. Dr. Rodriguez clicked them on with a loud buzz. Emily's heart jumped. "I have to shave around each bump to create access," the doctor said. "Just quarter-sized patches. I'll try to save as much hair as possible." Emily bit her lip and nodded. The first section came off in seconds. Hair floated to the sheet below. It felt surreal, like shedding pieces of herself. The second patch was closer to the crown. Emily winced, not from pain but from the sound. The clippers buzzed near her ears, so loud, so intimate. She thought about Prom, about the photos, about Jake. The third, fourth, fifth. Tiny bald circles marked her scalp like landmines. Dr. Rodriguez worked quickly, pausing only to blot small drops of fluid or inspect the holes. "They're moving less now," she noted, "probably reacting to the anesthesia." Emily didn't want to know that. She didn't want to know anything. By the time all 7 patches were cleared, the room felt colder, like something sacred had been stripped away. "All right," Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "We're ready to begin." Emily opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling again. She didn't want to look at the instruments, didn't want to feel what came next. But she could already sense the eyes of every nurse in the room on her, waiting, watching. "Focus on my voice," Diane whispered. "Okay, baby? Just keep your eyes on me." Dr. Rodriguez picked up a pair of forceps and leaned toward the largest bump, the one near the crown. She used gauze to blot away the clear fluid still seeping from the breathing hole. Then she pressed gently around the wound. "Here we go," she murmured. "You'll feel some pressure." Emily closed her eyes and held her breath. Then she felt it, the tug, a deep, slow pull, like something embedded far beneath the skin being coaxed upward. It wasn't sharp, but it was wrong. It felt like her skull was being turned inside out. Then something shifted, and she knew it was coming out. Emily could feel the tension in Dr. Rodriguez's fingers as the forceps clamped down, deep inside the swollen tissue. The sensation was unlike anything she'd ever felt. A living tug, something lodged inside her body, resisting, fighting, refusing to be removed. The pressure increased, something wriggled beneath her skin. Then a sudden pop, like a suction seal breaking. "It's coming," Dr. Rodriguez said calmly. Emily gritted her teeth, tears running down her temples, but she didn't scream. She just felt it, inch by inch, the parasite emerging from her scalp. A warm trail of fluid trickled down the side of her head. Then it was out. With a soft plop, Dr. Rodriguez dropped it into the metal specimen tray. The sound echoed through the sterile room like a gunshot. Diane gasped. The larva was about 1.5 inches long, fat and pale white, with rings of tiny black hooks around its body. It writhed on the metal like a bloated grub, alive, moving as if it still belonged somewhere inside. Her daughter. "Oh my God," Diane whispered. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. I think I—" She swayed suddenly, then collapsed to the floor. "Mom!" Emily cried, lifting her head. "Get a nurse!" Dr. Rodriguez barked, not looking away from Emily's scalp. 2 nurses rushed over and knelt beside Diane. One checked her pulse. The other grabbed an ammonia inhalant. She fainted. "Pulse is steady," one of them said. "She'll be okay." Emily felt her stomach twist as she turned her head and saw the larva still moving in the tray. "That was inside me?" she whispered, voice thin and shaking. Dr. Rodriguez nodded gently. "You're doing great. 1 down, 6 to go. I don't know if I can." Emily started, but the door swung open. "Emily?" It was David Harper, her father, looking slightly out of breath, still wearing his work clothes. He took one look at his daughter, lying under hospital lights with patches of her hair shaved and blood matting her scalp, and then spotted Diane being helped into a chair. What the hell happened? She fainted, a nurse said. David crossed the room in 2 strides and took Emily's hand. "I'm here. I'm right here." Emily squeezed his fingers. "They're taking them out. I saw it." He glanced at the tray. His face blanched, but he didn't look away. "Okay. You're strong. You've got this, doctor." Rodriguez moved on to the second bump. This time, the tissue around the larva was more inflamed. The breathing hole was clogged with fluid, and she had to use a scalpel to gently widen the opening. Emily flinched when the blade touched her skin, even through the numbing. "This one's deeper," the doctor muttered. The forceps went in. Another tug. This one didn't come easily. Emily clenched her jaw until it ached. David whispered to her. Nonsense words. "Almost there, you're okay," deep breath, like they could hold her together. Suddenly, there was a sharp snap. Dr. Rodriguez froze. "Damn, what happened?" David asked. "The larva tore," she said grimly. Only part of it came out. She showed them. Half of a segmented body wriggled between the forceps, the end trailing fluid. Emily's eyes went wide. "Does that mean—" "It's okay," Dr. Rodriguez said quickly. "We can still remove the rest, but this will take more time." She reached for a second set of tools. A tiny curved hook. A suction device. Tweezers so fine they looked like needles. "Don't move, Emily. I need you to be very, very still." Emily closed her eyes and gripped her father's hand tighter. She could feel it, the fragments, still inside her, resisting extraction. Every second that passed made her feel more violated, more invaded. It wasn't just about Prom anymore. It wasn't even about the pain. It was about the realization that her body had been turned into a host. Her scalp, a nest, for creatures that didn't belong. Creatures that fed and grew inside her while she smiled in photos and tried on dresses, and now they were fighting to stay. The 5th larva came out harder than the rest. It was lodged deep behind her left ear, nestled close to the base of her skull. Dr. Rodriguez had to make a second incision to widen the hole. The pressure made Emily dizzy. She could feel every tug in her bones, a pulling sensation that reverberated down her neck and into her teeth. She gritted her jaw so hard she thought she might crack a molar. Another one out. Then the 6th. By now the bed sheets were stained with pink blotches. Her scalp was dotted with bloody cotton pads and used gauze, and the specimen tray now held 6 white, writhing creatures, each plumper than the last. The nurses stopped trying to hide their expressions. One had quietly turned her face away, unable to watch the tray anymore. Another kept the suction tool running, eyes locked on her gloves. Emily had stopped crying. Her body was too drained. Her arms lay limp at her sides. Her eyes stayed closed, as if not seeing the room would make it more bearable. But her hands still gripped her father's fingers like a vice. "Last one," Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "This one's smaller, less inflamed." It came out easier. A slick slurp as it slid free from the hole. The nurse dropped it into the tray with the others. All 7 white larvae, some squirming weakly, others curling and twisting, their spines visibly catching on the metal. "They're, still alive," David said, barely above a whisper. "Yes," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "They'll stay alive for a few more hours, maybe longer, unless preserved." Emily opened her eyes slowly and turned her head toward the tray. Big mistake. Her stomach flipped. The sight of them, all lined up, glistening, grotesque, was too much. She rolled to her side and vomited into the basin again. Diane, now recovered, rushed over to hold her hair back, even what was left of it. Her own face was pale, but her hands were steady. Dr. Rodriguez cleaned each wound with antiseptic, working carefully around the raw openings. "You'll have scabs for a while," she said, "and some hair loss around the extraction points, but no permanent damage to your skull or tissue." "No damage?" Emily croaked, her voice hoarse. "They were eating me. They were feeding on subcutaneous tissue. Not organs or bone. You got here just in time." David looked at Diane, then back at the tray. What if we had waited? Another few days? They would have grown bigger, maybe pushed deeper, and at some point they would have emerged. Out of her head? Diane asked, horrified. Yes, Dr. Rodriguez said simply. They leave on their own when they're mature. That's how they complete their life cycle. Emily shut her eyes again. Her head felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Her thoughts came slowly now, dragging through her mind like syrup. She had almost gone to prom, with these things alive inside her. The bandages came next. Dr. Rodriguez wrapped each site with sterile gauze and medical tape. 7 white patches dotted her scalp. Some were near the front, some in the back, but no matter how she styled her hair, they'd show, "You'll need antibiotics. And painkillers," the doctor added. "I'm writing a prescription now, and you need to avoid scratching. No matter how much it itches." "It already itches," Emily whispered. "That's the healing process beginning." A nurse handed Diane a care packet with instructions. Another brought in a mirror and set it on the tray. Emily didn't want to look, but she did. She leaned up slowly, feeling every throb in her skull, and stared at her reflection. The girl in the mirror wasn't prom ready. Her eyes were red and puffy, her skin blotchy, hair matted, patchy, the bandages stark against the dark strands. But something else had changed too. There was something harder behind her eyes now. Not fear, not even pain. Resolve. "You were brave," Diane said quietly, standing beside her. "No," Emily said. "I was stupid. I should have said something weeks ago." Dr. Rodriguez placed the sealed specimen jar beside her on the tray. Inside, the 7 larvae floated in preservation fluid. Still, lifeless now. "These are yours to keep," she said. "Some patients want to forget. Others, keep them as a reminder." Emily looked at the jar. They didn't belong in a horror movie. They didn't belong in a textbook. They belonged to her story now. "I'll keep them," she said softly. Emily stepped out of the car and into the golden glow of early evening. The hospital wristband was still wrapped around her arm. Her scalp throbbed beneath the bandages, and every step she took made her feel like she was floating, not from joy, but from exhaustion. Her parents flanked her on either side, quiet, uncertain whether to speak. Inside the house, everything was still exactly as she'd left it that morning. The curling iron sat on the bathroom counter, unplugged but waiting. Her dress, a shimmering deep blue with silver beading along the bodice, still hung on the closet door, untouched. A bottle of setting spray sat beside her vanity mirror, as if the day hadn't gone completely off the rails, but it had. And the girl standing in the mirror now was no longer the one who'd planned this night for months. Emily dropped onto her bed and let out a breath that felt like it had been sitting in her chest all day. Diane stood in the doorway, unsure whether to enter. "Do you want me to help with your hair?" she asked gently. Emily shook her head. "There's not much left to style. You could wear the headband, the silver one with the little flowers." Emily reached up, gently parting the strands near one of the gauze patches. Her fingers came away sticky with ointment. The thought of a headband pressing against the wounds made her flinch. "I'll figure something out," she said. Diane nodded and backed away, giving her daughter the space she needed. Alone, Emily moved like someone older than 17. Every action was slow, deliberate. She brushed what hair she could, gently detangling it and smoothing it over the bald spots. Some of the patches showed no matter what she did. The bandages were too white, too bulky. The wounds were too fresh. She pulled out the silver flower headband anyway and placed it carefully across her forehead. It didn't hide much, but it gave her a frame, a shape, a touch of control. Makeup was harder. Her hands trembled when she tried to apply eyeliner. She wiped it off twice before finally settling on mascara and a tinted lip gloss. Nothing heavy. Her skin was still blotchy, and no concealer could hide the toll of what she'd endured. At 6:35 p.m., the doorbell rang. She froze, then rose. "Jake." She took one last look at herself in the mirror. The girl looking back was broken, patched together with tape and willpower, but she was still standing. Emily opened the front door to find Jake in his tuxedo, holding a small corsage of white roses. He blinked when he saw her. She had prepared herself for the look, the reaction, but it still hurt. "Hi," she said. "Emily," he breathed. "Are you okay? Define okay." He stepped inside, glancing nervously at the bandages on her scalp, the half-hidden bald spots, the fatigue in her eyes. I wasn't sure you'd still want to go. I almost didn't," she admitted. "But after what I went through today, I couldn't just sit home." Jake offered her the corsage. She hesitated. Her hand moved slowly, bandaged fingers fumbling with the elastic. He watched her struggle but didn't help. An awkward silence settled between them. Then Jake said, "You're really brave, or really stupid." He gave a weak laugh. "Still, I'm glad you're okay. That's what matters." Emily smiled thinly. But something in her had shifted. She wasn't the girl who needed Jake's approval anymore. The gymnasium had been transformed. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a golden haze over the polished dance floor. Round tables were draped in white linen, and the DJ booth thumped with pop music and pulsing bass. The air smelled like hairspray, perfume, and cheap cologne. Emily stepped inside with Jake at her side, and the room stopped, not all at once, not loudly, but in that subtle, suffocating way that only teenagers mastered. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. Eyes locked onto the white bandages peeking through her carefully arranged hair, the silver headband doing little to distract from the wounds that curved along her scalp like a map of trauma. People whispered. She couldn't hear the words, but she knew what they were. That's her, the girl with the bugs, maggots. In her head. Ew. Oh my God. Jake shifted beside her, adjusting his cuffs, his smile stiff. He waved to a few friends. Some waved back, others didn't. Emily walked forward anyway, spine straight. She could feel the weight of every glance, every whisper like a cold breeze against her skin. But she kept moving. She had earned this moment with blood. At their table, her friends tried to act normal, tried to smile, compliment her dress, make jokes, but their eyes betrayed them. "You look amazing. You made it. That's awesome. We were so worried." But none of them asked how she really was. No one offered a hug. One girl leaned back slightly as Emily took her seat, eyes flicking nervously toward her scalp. Emily smiled anyway, pretended she didn't notice. When the photographer came by for couple shots, Jake hesitated. "Do you want pictures?" he asked. "I do," she said. She stood tall, smiled, tilted her head in a way that exposed the bandages fully. She didn't care anymore. Let it be captured. Let it be permanent. She had survived something most of them couldn't even imagine, and she wasn't going to hide it. As the night went on, Jake began to drift, not physically. He still stood near her, walked with her to the punch bowl, swayed beside her during slow songs, but his touch faded. He stopped reaching for her hand, stopped brushing her back, stopped making eye contact. During one fast song, she caught him laughing with another group, looser, easier, the way he used to be around her. And when she looked at him too long, he looked away, like he couldn't see her the same anymore. That hurt more than the larvae. By 9:45, the prom king and queen were announced. She clapped politely, smiling with the crowd, though the applause sounded far away. By 10, she had had enough. She leaned toward Jake. "I think I'm ready to go." "Yeah," he said quickly, almost too quickly. "Of course." The car ride was silent, not tense, just empty, like both of them knew something had ended but didn't want to say it aloud. Outside her house, he walked her to the door. "Thanks for still coming with me," she said. "Of course," he repeated. She nodded. "Good night, Jake." He hesitated, then leaned in, not for a kiss but for a hug, a quick, loose embrace. His chin never touched her hair, and just like that, he was gone. Inside, Emily peeled off her heels and stared at herself in the hallway mirror. The girl staring back looked tired, worn, but powerful. The bandages were still there, the scars still fresh. But so was the truth. She had faced something vile, alien, and terrifying, and walked through it. Not for attention, not to prove anything, but because surviving it meant something. Her scalp itched again, deep and maddening. A nurse's warning echoed in her mind. "Don't scratch, no matter what." She smiled. "Nice try," she whispered, walking away from the mirror. "Sometimes what we ignore is what hurts us most." Emily thought she was just stressed, too busy, too focused on her future to worry about a few bumps on her scalp. But inside those bumps, something was growing, quietly, patiently, and by the time she listened to her body, it had already taken hold. We all do it. We brush things off, tell ourselves it's nothing, but sometimes nothing turns out to be everything. So if there's one thing this story should leave you with, it's this: listen to your body, trust your instincts, and never let fear or pride delay the care you deserve. Because health doesn't wait, and neither should you.